Welcome. Today we are talking with Patty Wise. She is a partner at Spengler Nathanson. She's also a certified specialist in labor and employment law and a faculty member at the Graduate School of Banking at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Patty, welcome, and thank you for joining us at today's Banker Digest.
Thanks so much, Larry.
Great. All right, Patty. So let's get started. So what are you advising your clients on how to best respond to today's staffing challenges of hiring and retaining employees?
Well, things have changed a lot in the past decades, in the past year, in the past week. So it's a kind of a moving target. But I will say that generally it's much more now than strict legal compliance. And I think that employers are used to legal compliance, and maybe what they're less accustomed to is creating an environment where people want to work, even if it's a remote environment, and a focus on culture, I think, is much more important than it's ever been. We've talked about it in the past, but I think that the workforce now, in light of changing demographics, certainly COVID, is looking for more. They're looking for something beyond just, kind of checking the boxes and doing the right thing. In fact, there was a SHRM study in 2019 that looked at turnover. And we all know the cost of turnover is high. Over the preceding 5 years prior to 2019, the cost of turnover was $223 billion. And most of that, right, it's an amazing number to think about, $223 billion. And most of that turnover had to do with leaving an environment, leaving maybe not even a toxic environment, that we might think of, but just a workplace, a culture that the employee just wasn't willing to stay with. So that's really where the focus is. I think part of that, maybe a good part of that has to come from the top down. It has to come from leadership. And, we might all intellectually know that, but again, the environment is changing so much, we might not know exactly what that means today. And I will say for all of us, whether we're in a leadership position or aspire to a leadership position, it's really incumbent upon us to gain knowledge, to teach ourselves, to really take a hard look at what could we do better, what don't we know. And I think in some ways, I will say the legal profession, I think in some ways we've done a good job as far as, most people I think understand the concept of harassment, for example. Much more so than when I started my practice. But I think we've done such a good job that we feel like, okay, no, we know that, we understand it. So if we know it, we understand what it is, we don't have that problem. And I think that's actually not the case. Harassment continues to be a significant legal issue. Retaliation is the leading claim now against employers. And concepts, very, I think, complex concepts, like something, I'll use the example of implicit or unconscious bias. I think we've done a really good job, and most leaders could say, yes, I understand that concept. I know what that is. But unfortunately, I think when I say we've done maybe too good of a job, we think that because we can know it and name it, that we have overcome it. And that's not the case. So I think that the leadership, has to be really engaged in this kind of creating the culture and in the environment that people want to stay with.
Great. Thank you, Patty. All good. I like your point about the leadership, and it starts at the top. And I agree that we've defined these things and they have better definitions. But also, as you started, employees are today perhaps equally focused on the workplace culture issues and the compensation issues. So, how do you, advise banks? How do you move beyond merely the statutory compliance on these issues to really leverage these for the outcomes of everybody?
Well, again, I think most employers, we've done a good job. I think most would have probably a policy that meets the legal requirements. And many, I won't say most, but many will do their kind of obligatory annual training, which I think really is maybe it's not a bad thing. Some training, of course, better than others, but I think we can really move beyond that as well. No one, I've not met anyone, let's say that, who looks forward to that annual harassment training. I do a lot of it, and people are not losing sleep the night before in excitement about the annual training that's happening the next day. So I think that's kind of maybe a delivery method that we can do better. And by that I mean this should be part of more a holistic kind of, and I won't even say training effort, but just making this part of the conversation. So harassment, but again, more broadly, the culture, there's no reason that can't be a part of regularly scheduled meetings. For example, we won't make the meeting, we won't have half of it devoted to harassment, but we can talk about, there are unfortunately so many current topics. We could talk about one of those. We could talk about a certain aspect of the policy. And I think updating our policies, again, I think probably most employers have legally compliant policies, but I'm guessing we can probably find language in every employer's policy that has been there largely unchanged, maybe for decades, right? And that language isn't bad, right? We might keep that, we might build on that. But I also know that with what we read, with what we see in media and in social media, we could add to that language, revise that language so that it is more current and more relevant to the workforce. And so those are the kinds of things that could be discussed on an ongoing basis. Just regular check-ins, regular meetings, quarterly meetings, whatever's already scheduled. Another concept I really like, we've all heard about and maybe experienced the video training where you've got to sit in front of your laptop or your desktop, and for half an hour you've got to check in, or you've got to answer questions, right? That's not particularly engaging. I think people are pretty accomplished at getting a lot of tasks done during that time. So how about something like a microburst of training? I really like that. Just a quick, something that people comes up maybe periodically, or they can access it. And just, again, so many current topics that would really be helpful in kind of moving forward and what we're learning, what we know, and how to create that kind of culture.
Right. Wow. Really great insights. I really like your approach to mainstream these conversations rather than separate the discussions on whether it be harassment, diversity, inclusion, all these topics that we're talking about, so that it really becomes part of the everyday thought process, not just the quote annual activity, you say. So, following along these lines, how do you see, measurements and reporting evolving, with these ideas of mainstreaming?
Well, I think that's a process too that has evolved. It's maybe not the annual performance evaluation anymore, but more an ongoing kind of coaching, maybe in connection with an annual review. But we have to hold managers accountable. We always say that. What we want done, it has to get measured. One good example, I think, in the way we can do that, we can check in with managers. What kind of discussions are you having at your meetings with employees? Mentoring is a particular favorite of mine. I think that when people are mentored in the workplace, regardless of, and you can have several mentors, but I think that is much more likely to create that kind of environment that people, feel a part of. But we can hold managers accountable, for that. And I think it needs to be more of, again, kind of checking in. Who are you mentoring? Let us know, who are you mentoring, and then are the people that you're mentoring, hopefully more than one, but are the people you're mentoring, do they all look like you? Right. We don't need to have quotas, but let's be mindful about looking at, are they all the same? I like the phrase ducks pick ducks, right? We pick ducks because we know ducks, right? And so we pick people like us. So let's be mindful about that. If you're mentoring 3 people, in your same demographic, great, that's excellent. Now, how do we go beyond that demographic and have you mentor some other people? And, you know, mentoring should be very transparent, very public. We want to see leaders who are mentoring, because that's going to encourage other people to mentor.
Right. Good, good. Wow. Lot of really insightful and powerful things. So, Patty, thank you for sharing your insights and advice on the next level of workplace engagement for today's employees.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Right. In closing, thank you for joining us today at today's Banker Digest. If you have additional questions for Patty, please see the links in her bio.